Well, I am just so glad to be with you guys. And I would love to know, because I wanted to share a few thoughts from last night again today. How many of y'all were here last night versus, okay, so like probably half, maybe? Is that about half? I'm going to repeat a few things, and I apologize in advance, but I get really sad thinking that some of the important things that I want to share from last night, the people here this morning wouldn't hear. But I guess it's never bad to hear something twice. They say it takes, 11 times to make it a core memory, and we want to make some core memories of some important truths. So, let me talk to you guys for a minute. And I think we may have a little AV this morning, not as much as last night, because this is kind of just a more intimate moment for us ladies to chat. And as I shared last night, I want to begin again by really universalizing this story. I talk a lot about this notion of invisible wheelchairs, that likely I don't see anyone in a wheelchair besides me today. This could feel extremely unrelatable, first of all. But one of the core truths of life is that what feels most personal is actually most universal in our stories. And I may be the only one here in a wheelchair, but I believe we all have many invisible wheelchairs inside of us. And that can feel really hard to talk about in Christian context. It's really sad, because it should be the place we can most talk about our invisible wheelchairs. But tragically, we feel like we have to be perfect. And the reality is we've all got a lot swimming inside of us that's not okay. And quite literally, that is potentially confining and constraining our lives, holding us back in our stories. And goodness, from mental health issues to eating disorders to all the actual literal stuff going on inside of us, to shame and guilt and haunting memories and just all the stuff. We've just all got a lot of stuff in our stories. And then very real in this room, no doubt, from relational breakdown to financial ruin to fill in the blank, major emotional stuff. We've all just got really big issues. And there's been such a freedom in me in recognizing that I'm not nearly the only one living with wheelchairs. But what is so beautiful about seeing this invisible wheelchair and a picture of one on the outside is that we all have the opportunity, I believe, to live in wheelchair freedom. And that has nothing to do with the fact that I can technically stand up from my wheelchair. And that's why I'm not, because I want you to take this point home, that my very physical wheelchair on the outside of my body, I believe, is not limiting my life. It's actually doing the opposite. This wheelchair is enabling me to show up for my story. It's actually my avenue to freedom. And I think potentially the same could be true for all of us. That the avenues that we feel like are the roadblocks, that are the confining, constraining elements to our lives, could potentially, and I say that so tenderly, with so much time. I'm 15 years out from my getting into the wheelchair, so it's different than if you're in major pain. You must have this special thing that I don't have, because in my suffering, I don't feel the hope of Jesus and don't feel great and joy of the Lord, whatever. However, that's a tragedy, because we're all living different versions of the very same story, aren't we? Did any of you have a massive brainstem stroke, become severely disabled, nearly die afterwards? Some of you may have had strokes. Maybe some of you are disabled. Largely in this room, probably not a ton of that in your story. Is anyone's life perfect? work out for them exactly like they thought it was going to be when they were a little girl. No hands either, because we all have stuff, don't we? We all have a lot of hard stuff in our story. So I pray that as you listen to me share, you can see yourself in my story, because we're all living out different versions of that very same story. So I would love to start by telling y'all a funny story. If any of you are on Instagram, you may remember a few years ago on Instagram, people did hashtag 10-year challenge, where they showed pictures of 10 years in their lives. So before, or not for them, well, yeah, before they got older, but 10 years of life. And I decided I would do the 10-year challenge, and I would show age 25 to age 35 and kind of, give some perspective to the 10-year challenge. And as everyone's complaining about getting old or getting a job or whatever, I'm like, yeah. And, it was important to, just recognize life can change in an instant, definitely in 10 years, but in a moment. And at the time that I first shared this, earlier this year, I was still 40, so it was like 25 to 35 to 40, but now I'm 41, so it's not as seamless, but yes, and here's the 41-year-old version. They all were going to let me die in the waiting room of the hospital. And essentially later, when my neurosurgeon showed my brain scans to of the top doctors in our country, he showed the brain scans, and they all assumed, well, surely that patient died. And he was able to say, no, that patient is alive and in ICU on life support recovering right now. And the room spontaneously exploded into applause. And the doctors could not believe and cannot believe that I lived. And it is a legitimate miracle that I'm here, even though, yay, thank you. Thank you. Even though, obviously, I am extremely impaired. And that tension is just fascinating in all of our stories to unpack. So what does healing look like? And what does a miracle look like? And what does all this look like in all of our lives? And what does it mean? It's a kind of a fascinating question of, did I get the miracle? Well, does this look like a miracle if you saw me in the grocery store? Probably not. But if you knew some specifics, you might think it's a crazy, crazy miracle. And I think that's all of our lives, that we miss the miracle because we're waiting for it to look different than we think it will look. And for me, when Dr. Gonzalez removed the AVM and was able to take it all out and actually remove 60% of my cerebellum, which is the part of my brain that controls balance, which is why I can't walk, he had to make legitimate sacrifices in order to do it. He made the decision to wound me for life very greatly. And I'm alive because he did that. So was it worth it? Yes, of course it was. But it wasn't without, significant, as you are seeing, impairment. I probably will never, and I don't put God in a box, but probably on this earth will never walk normally. I'll never run again. I'll never drive a car. My hand doesn't work. My face is paralyzed. I have 10,000 random issues that are all connected to the doctor making sacrifices to keep me alive. And I just think that is such a beautiful and powerful point for all of our stories, that there can be deep wounding and healing in the same moment. That I'm here, I'm in the room because of some incredible wounding. I'm able to be here. You know, I believe if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And I have deep purpose. And I have a pulse. And my body's pretty messed up. But you know what, ladies? And this is for all of you. This body is the only interface I am ever going to have with existence on earth. Have you ever thought of that? Like in all of our stories, whatever our body feels like and looks like and whatever we've got to give, this is it. This is all we are ever going to have this side of heaven, is what God has given us. So this is pretty special. I don't pretend I wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and I'm like, this is so amazing. I just love this. But there is a deep sense that God has given me this. You know, these, what is this, 4 inches probably? These 4 inches of my face are paralyzed. Now, why was it not my knee or my arm or whatever, something else, my foot, but my face? I have to think God is in that. There's no way this was some tragic cosmic accident. I can't believe that. I have to believe God knows what he's doing. That can be a painful pill to swallow sometimes, for sure. I do believe there is a sense in much time that God is writing a really incredible story. So yeah, my 40th birthday, and I know I talked to you guys that were here last night about this, but it's just so important to say to you all that my 40th birthday last year, we took my kids. So my 15-year-old now was a baby when I had the stroke. He's the tall one. And the little guy hiding back there is my 7-year-old John. And he's a mess and wonderful, and I'm surviving being his mother in a wheelchair. It's really, really crazy. And yeah, life has gone on for our family of 4. And yet, it looked kind of different than some families. And if all you knew about that photograph was that that poor lady can't even stand up for her 40th birthday family portrait, that can be really sad. But if you look a little bit more at that picture and know a few different specifics, you might think it's pretty wonderful. Like that lady survived a massive stroke and should be dead. And that little 7-year-old should not be in their picture. She should never have had a second child. That man, husband who stayed with his wife through this tragedy is there. They're still married, going on 19 years. And yeah, that's life going on for that family, and that's a glorious picture, a beautiful redemption this side of heaven. And you see what I'm saying? Like, if you have eyes to see things one way versus eyes to see things another way, you can be looking at the very same picture and see very, very different things. And I just think that is so important for our lives on earth. We see what we want to see. And I think we should see the goodness of God in the land of the living in our stories. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment, but we choose what we want to see. I love the truth of Isaiah 45:3. It's a beautiful passage that says, God says, I will give you hidden treasure in the darkness, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am God, the God of Israel, the God who summons you by name. And I love this thought so much that if you are going to be in the terrible, deep darkness of your life, of your story, which if you live long enough, you probably are going to go through some legitimate darkness, you might as well get the treasure. You might as well mine out the gold from that time. You might as well learn the right lessons from what you're going through. So I long to do that with my life, and I hope what I am about to share with you is just a few of the things that I feel like are stuff I wish I would have known when this happened. That as a 25-year-old, I would have really internalized these truths. And honestly, as a 45-year-old or 65-year-old or 85-year-old or 15-year-old, we need to know some deep truths and adjust our paradigm as we in the Western world are not used to not having all of our dreams come true. We are deeply obsessed with comfort. And in being so obsessed with our dreams coming true and feeling great in the meantime, we are missing the richness of life, I believe, and a life that honors Jesus in the mess of our story. So with no further ado, I'm going to give y'all a little pep talk. And in giving you a pep talk with some things I think you need to know, I'm going to hopefully share some truth with you that if any of you are mothers, you could pass on to your kids for them to start learning right about now. And for those of you that aren't, to pass on to anybody who'll listen. And for all of us, let's preach it to our own hearts, these things. So, number one, ladies, you have much greater capacity to do harder things than you think you do. You know that? You have much greater capacity because of Jesus in your story to do harder things than you think. The beautiful truth of 1 John 4:4, greater is he in me than he who is in the world. 2 Peter 1:3, his divine power has given us everything that we need. We lack nothing, everything that we need. Philippians 4:19, he will supply every one of your needs. You are actually anti-fragile. Everything in our world tells you you are super fragile, you cannot handle it, you're easily triggered, like you're on the edge. But the reality is, you aren't. You aren't. You have staying power because of Jesus who is with you in the story. And that's paradigm shifting in our world today. We are very much indoctrinated to believe like we can't handle anything and we're going to fly off the edge so easily. No, you're not. When you know Jesus, you can do this. He's got it through you. You can't handle your life. No, none of us can. But he handles it for you. And you can chill out, honestly. It's amazing how that happens. Point number 2. And this is something I really wish I would have known when I was a little girl. I've had to learn. You can dream new dreams. It is really, really incredible. You know, so many of us spend our whole lives chasing the dream from when we were a 6-year-old girl. That is such a sad way to live. The truth of John 16:33, in this world, we will have trouble. But we can take heart because he's overcome the world. We can pivot. We can develop some emotional agility. We can live a life that is winsome and move into things we didn't think we could do and become people we didn't think we could become because of Jesus and the story. We are not wedded to this thing that was when we were 8. That's so ludicrous. And on paper, none of us would, say that. Like, oh yeah, I'm still waiting for my dream from when I was 8 years old to come true. Like, no one would ever do that. But aren't we all doing that? Aren't we? Who I thought I would be when I was a child is who I'm planning on being when I'm grown up. And yet, what if I say, no, I'm living with open hands? I do not know what the story is going to look like, but I do know it's a good story because that's the only kind of story God can write. I think that is how we are really called to live, is to dream new dreams. I love the truth of, I think it's 1 Corinthians 13:11. that when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put childish ways behind me. Like that is what we are called to do, put the ways of childhood behind us and dream new dreams and live with open hands. And here's what's really crazy when we do. So when I was a little girl, I was like a true communicating machine. Like they called me Chatty Cathy. I would talk to anybody. I mean, it was wild. And I would line up my dolls in my closet and make passionate speeches to them about Jesus and justice and, all the important things my dolls needed to know. I was just, really giving it to them. And I go on to college, Stanford University, and major in communication. And even pre-stroke was, I was the speaker at the women's retreat for our church and, doing some speaking, but, that wasn't really the central focus of life. I didn't really know what that would look like long term. And I was prayerfully living with some open hands, but not perfectly. And then I have this massive stroke and nearly dying. Clearly, the last thing I'm ever going to do is have that childhood in her closet, 8-year-old Katherine talking to her dollies, be what I then do with my life. You understand what I'm saying? Surely the room of real dollies would never be listening to the girl who can barely speak with a paralyzed face who's in a wheelchair, because she would never be on the stage talking about Jesus to rooms of people. Kind of crazy. Sometimes living with open hands means we are able to pivot into the story that God is writing. So sometimes God's dreams for us and our dreams and talents and desires come full circle. That they get used in the story, but maybe they're nothing like we thought they would. I never dreamed when I was a little girl, surely when I grow up, I will be in a wheelchair and will talk to rooms and arenas all about Jesus. Perfect. Never in a million years would I think that. And yet, I love this story. This is the goodness of God in the land of the living, and I'm getting to be a part of this. And the Lord is so tremendously using this wheelchair as a vehicle, because what this wheelchair showcases as I speak is brokenness. The medium is the message here. I get to showcase life is not perfect. Jesus is. And I could have never done that before. When sweet Claire knew me at Stanford University, Catherine Arnold wasn't getting to showcase without words all the things. Redemption, Jesus showing up, so many just incredible truths that I don't even have to speak to showcase. And that happened. And I think that is the reality in all of our stories, that we can, in fact, dream new dreams for our lives. Point number 3. This is my favorite. You get to decide how you feel about your story. How cool is that? No one else gets to decide. That's on you. Everyone else may try and try hard to tell you how to feel about your story. But the reality is they don't get to. After I had the stroke, everybody had all the opinions about how I was going to feel about this. Everybody, friends, family alike, we got some major opinions happening of this is the worst, or this is the greatest, or this is the glory of God's blah, 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 or this is the satanic attack, all the opinions, all the thoughts. And, Years ago, I heard Mike Foster, who some of you may know of, just a really cool man, writer, speaker out of San Diego, and he talked about the opposite of hope. Sorry, the opposite of hurt is not hope. That we think like either we're hurting or we're hoping. But the opposite of hurt is hype. That there's this place between hurt and hype that is hope. And that is actually where we are called to live. It's not in toxic negativity or toxic positivity, but no, to live in the tension between those of true hopefulness in the story, not slapping a Jesus sticker on a Band-Aid, not slapping a Jesus Band-Aid on a bullet wound, honestly, but instead like engaging the real Jesus in the story. Recognizing the need for true hope in the story and not buying into just hurt and this narrative of all is lost, or for my story, like, look at the glory story the morning after I have a massive stroke and I'm laying in a hospital bed. That through much time and many tears, there is a recognition that true hope will sustain. It can't be either extreme. And I think that is so important for us because I feel like we think in church context, all must be okay. We just got to make it all okay and only present like the buttoned up, person that's got it all together and we're doing just fine. Or we're like depressive and all is lost and I'm super angsty and I'm the victim of this story. And there are legitimate victims. I'm not remotely talking about anybody who's in a domestic abuse situation or otherwise. But in general, as I speak for me, I am not the victim of my story. And likely you are not the victim of yours either, is the reality. The reality is we're not the victims. We are more than conquerors in Christ in our stories. We are overcomers in the story that God is writing through our lives. And I just think that's been super helpful for me to take it back, to say, oh, wait, nobody gets to tell me how to feel about my story. That is right up here. That is between my ears. That's up to me. That's on me too, to decide how am I going to feel about the story that God is writing. And what if I love it? Can I say that out loud? Because you're supposed to hate your story. Whatever's going on, like you're supposed to really be angsty about it and hate it, right? But like, what if I love it? What does that mean? What if I decide, like, I love this story? Like, this is a great story. This is a story where I see God taking care of me. And we can all do this in our lives with potentially maybe less extremes happening in the story. We can say, like, wait, the boundary lines have fallen in the most pleasant of places. That's Psalm 16:6, that the boundary lines of my life are pretty dramatic, for sure, but what if they're keeping me safe exactly where I am? And what if I love where I am? We moved from Los Angeles to Atlanta about 5 years ago. And before we moved to Los Angeles, I remember choosing to flip the switch, to say, you know what? I'm going to love Atlanta. I'm going to absolutely love it. And it didn't really even matter if I did or not when I got there, because I decided in advance, I'm going to love it. This is where God has called us, and I get to choose that. And I don't know, but I love it. And it far surpasses Los Angeles 10,000 ways. Atlanta is amazing. And There's a Subway at the end of my street, and in Los Angeles, there was 5-star restaurants at the end of my street. And I'm obsessed with living in Atlanta. It is so awesome for 10,000 reasons. I think that probably has something to do with the fact that it is amazing, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I decided I will love it where I go. And that is super important. You have so much control over how you feel about what's happening in your story. As some of you may know, and definitely for those of you who were there last night, I talked about our camp. We have this amazing camp for families where someone has disabilities. And there are several of our sweet volunteers here today. And I'm so grateful, Amanda and company, that y'all are here, and several other ones last night. And our camp it's just glorious. People with profound disabilities are invited to come, just have a week of celebration at a camp, but vacation-like experience. We make it really, really special for our campers and just really celebrate all the things, life, being here, showing up for the story, the goodness of God in our stories. And on our final night of camp, we have this dance party, which sounds crazy. But if you've never been to a dance party with disabled people, whoa, back up. It's phenomenal. And as you can see through these pictures, not a lot of real suffering and sadness, where you'd think surely when you bring a bunch of people with disabilities together, it's just a major bummer, like tragic, right? And yet, I don't think you're probably seeing that in this dance party, in these pictures, because it is literally the opposite. What these friends with disabilities, myself included, are doing through our dance party and through our lives is rebelling against the darkness, choosing to have a joyful rebellion when life is not okay. You know, I think the reason, excuse me, that our camp is just this like magical, electrifying joy fest, wouldn't you agree? It's crazy. It's because all is not well. Everyone sees, like, nobody's okay. I mean, we got amputees all around us, people in wheelchairs, and just all the problems on the outside. And many you don't see on the inside. And there's this, like, collective joy. Because everyone is very aware, like, we're not promised tomorrow. We don't know the outcomes, but we can celebrate right here, right now, in our hard stories. And it's as if our camp family knows very well that we can choose to disrupt the lie, the idol that comfort, that joy can only come in a pain-free life. Because our camp family knows that is not available. Life is hard and full of pain. And yet we can rebel with a deep joy in our stories to whatever is happening, whatever suffering looks like. And I think what you are seeing in those wheelchairs, oh, and look at sweet Katie. And yes, that spicy blonde on the right is yours truly, celebrating. And what, Katie was hit Katie fell off a golf cart and had a traumatic brain injury and is now in a chair, cannot walk. And I don't know if you're seeing on her face pure joy. Katie is living in wheelchair freedom, and it is glorious. I am so inspired by our campers who are choosing to let joy be the story. And not in a fake way, not in a grin and bear it way, but in a, I get to decide how this plays out now. I cannot control what's happened in my life. Control is an illusion. But I can control what now? I control how I respond to it. how I move forward from it, how I narrate it. I get to decide all of it after the suffering has come. And I think that is a beautiful teacher for us all the able-bodied people. What an incredible lesson to learn. Like, I get to decide what I do with what I got. And I think that is a beautiful gospel story. Out of near death comes amazing new life. And we get to be a part of that. We get to live into that reality. And it is gold. So those are just 3 little take-home points for you, with a lot of points weaved into them. But what a thought. What a thought that we all get to be a part of dreaming new dreams for our lives, of narrating them in a way that we are deciding how we feel. The world is not deciding. Everybody in the whole world may have an opinion, but it is up to you. It is on you to decide how you feel about your story and how to rebel with tremendous joy to the story God is writing. Above all, this is definitely worthy of standing carefully and slowly so I don't fall off the stage. But the truth is, let me stand over here and not lose the mic this time. The truth is Psalm 42:5. You may already know it. I'm going to make a memory. You get to get bossy with your own soul. Psalm 42:5 says, "Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I will again praise him, my rock and my salvation." And that is what we get to do. We may not be feeling it, but we get to say, deeper than my feelings, I'm going with God. Deeper than anything happening in this physical world, I am making the decision in advance, which is smarter, that I'm going with God. I will not be swayed. I will not be moved. I am standing firm because I know and believe that God is here. He is with me and he is enough. And so I pray I'm going to sit down carefully. And actually, as I sit down, you can see I can kind of walk a little. It just doesn't look like normal walking. I will pray for you ladies to press on in your hard stories that look nothing like my own, but have very hard parts, no doubt. And that you will persevere, that you will look to Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and is now seated at the right hand of the throne of God. I pray that you will consider him who endured such opposition from sinful man, so that you yourselves grow weary or lose heart. Oh, isn't that beautiful? I say that a lot, and I'm like, oh, it's just so glorious. That's Hebrews 12. I would love to pray for y'all, and I can't see where's Brittany or Jay, but what's the plan now? Do we have time for a minute of Q&A, or do we move to book signings? Oh, so sweet, Connie, thank you. And I can tell y'all to buy our books because the money doesn't go to me. The money goes to support our camp. The camp is free for all the campers. So, yeah, I'm an ambassador. You should buy a bunch of books and take it home. And I'm not remotely benefiting from you doing that. The money goes to camp, so please support it. And are we doing Q&A or not?
Let's see if we have any questions for Katherine.
And Q&A is entirely optional if you don't, but if you want to, I'm an open book. Anybody got something? Connie.
Would you share with everybody? Would you mind sharing with everybody your bedtime prayer with your boys? It's just so strong and wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you asked that. Yes. And that ties into actually everything I talked about today, that we want to instill in our little boys And our children, if we had little girls, we had little girls too, that God makes, but that ultimately it is a good story that he's writing. So we tell our little boys, James and John, what need you to do the hard thing in the good story he's writing in your lives. I wish I would have heard that as a little girl. And you can do hard things because of him. But ultimately, do not lose heart. Do not become bitter. Do not be cynical. Because ultimately, somehow, some way, it is a beautiful story. It is a truly good story that God is writing. Thank you for asking that.
Does anybody else have a question?
Oh, yeah.
Hello. I was wondering, after hearing you and Jay last night, and maybe he could speak to this as well, did you ever hit that bitterness briefly? And then what did it look like? You both seem to have recovered together. You know, you both seem to be pacing with each other and with the Lord. What did that look like? You know, how did that path, I mean, you're 15 years down the road from this, but what did that look like? You are not, you're at a greater maturity level than you were in your 20s. And, you know, we're seeing you now, but how did that path look?
Yeah. Okay, Jay, you want to answer? You want me to? Or both?
Hello, I'm the only man here, I think, except for our AV people, but I'll come up. Thanks for that question. That's so nice. I think the prayer is always for a soft heart. And that has to be a really intentional prayer, because I think for any of us, when your heart starts to get hardened because things, we talked a little bit about last night, we kind of got back home, recovery, and then Katherine was diagnosed with another brain aneurysm. And then she broke her leg, and then she fell and broke her ribs, and now she currently has an ongoing vascular disorder where she's had vertebral artery dissection. So we don't kind of unpack that a lot of times, but there's an ongoing nature to all of our lives and stories. This is not, okay, you get to come up on the stage because this is over. And
right,
look, we prayed the prayers and we're done. And here, in 3 easy steps, you can overcome suffering too. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, totally.
Just in case you were wondering. And so there's always this opportunity to just say, I can't do this anymore. Or I shouldn't have to do this anymore. Or I'm so wounded that the next thing is just going to set me off and unleash the anger that has been pent up inside of me. So I think you have to be, in an ongoing way, vulnerable. You have to find releases for the emotions, which are real, but not be fully guided by just the emotion. Doing the next right thing in love. We always say in our marriage, we know the loving thing to do. We just don't want to do it always, right?
What is the quote? Learn to love what must be done.
Right.
And in marriage, is that Goethe, I think?
Yeah.
That you've taught me that they say if you act in love when this meaning of marriage, Tim Keller talks about this, that the Nazis did not initially hate the Jews. They acted in hate long enough that they grew to hate. And can that be true for love? That when you act in love, when you may not even feel it, the love comes. And I think that's what we, in a messed up way, no doubt, are doing.
Sure.
You're not messed up, I am.
We're both messed up pretty good, but we're still
true.
here.
Yeah, true.
But I think that idea of just praying for a soft heart, you hear about, in the Bible, like God gave them over to their hardened heart. Or, you hear that sort of warning that it's easy for us, even like in a physical way, for our hearts to over time calcify and get hardened, the arteries to harden. So like, how do we not let these little micro breaks in our heart harden our heart towards each other, towards God, towards our stories? And it's by just reorienting and praying all the time.
And
my heart would be soft with compassion, She has to share the stage now, and she doesn't know what to say. I'm just kidding. No, I don't. I didn't want to come up here, but thank you for the question. I'm happy to.
I think the prayer is to get some thick skin, but keep a soft heart. And that tension so often doesn't go well. You get one or the other. You get a thick skin, but you get like a angry, cynical, bitter self. Or you get a soft heart and you become a snowflake and you can't handle anything, and you're tragically reeling. But no, it's to do both. And you have capacity for both, to get thick skin but keep a very tender heart.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else?
Do you get to speak to a lot of children's groups because your message has no age?
Yes. I mean, some, yes. I just spoke to a precious group. Well, and goodness, I spoke at Passion Conference, which is a huge college-aged kids conference, which is 18 to, largely 23-year-olds. But yeah, no, I spoke at a high school a few weeks ago, and afterward, several of the teachers just in sobs came up to me. It was so beautiful, and just said, nothing could be more important than this day of school for these kids to hear that in this moment. Yes, actually, I spoke at my younger son when he was still in preschool chapel, and I translated all of my thinking and really a lot of this message to how does a small child view the world? So I brought a bedtime story and talked about this bedtime story you love, right? Even though there's hard parts in a story. This story has chapters, but you love this story, and there's a happy ending at this story. And just related it all to like a bedtime story. And I pray, who knows, but that it really connected to 4-year-olds, that it's hard, but God's good stuff is coming out of your story.
Yeah. I'll just add one little note, because I don't think you did, regarding that. We've been doing ministry for 10 years together. The stroke anniversary was 15 years ago. This past April we celebrated. But we've been doing ministry for 10 years, including just trying to translate this message of our life to all different kinds of specifics and different ages, and using the internet. The iPhone came out in 2008, which is when the stroke happened. So the digital age has been a big part of our story and sharing it. So we're happy to, of course, there's highs and lows of social media and all those things, but we want to redeem the internet with goodness, so we try to add in our little corner just the hope that we have found that has transcended, because we're all looking for the light at the end of that tunnel, a reason to keep getting out of bed in the morning. So anyway, hopeheals.com is our website. We have things like our camp. We're opening a coffee shop in Atlanta too that will be a community hub for us that will employ people with disabilities.
Maybe we'll open one in Dallas one day.
I like it. So it's a beautiful thing to just see sort of, what started as a family and a woman's tragedy, sort of the breaking open, now have sort of these avenues of new life and community. And check out. And Katherine just relaunched her podcast. So there's just, we're putting resources out there. I'm just telling you, because sometimes it's like, people are like, I
know. I forget to talk about all
No. It's just for like we want our life to be a resource. We want to.
That is true.
We want to learn and want to share. But hopeheals.com has everything from the camp to information about all the different things we're doing. We just signed another 3-book deal, so there'll be more books in the works.
But the reality is to reach a child, especially a teenager. Technology is a powerful tool these days. They're on their phones. Get them there.
That's true. We have said no TikTok, though, because we don't want to do the dances, because we don't have much dignity left, but we draw the line somewhere.
Just kidding.
We've got one last question.
You're a big TikToker.
So I'm Jay's cousin, and y'all, about 10 years ago, gave me some marriage advice before I was married. That stuck with me. And so I would love to know, now that you've been doing ministry together for about the last 10 years and your crazy schedule and all that stuff, I would love to know just practically, how do you prioritize your marriage?
Oh, cool. Good question.
Love you, Amanda. Sorry, I tried to walk away, but maybe, I don't know. I'll come back. Would you like to answer the question?
You're back. I love it.
Okay. I'll be back. I think early on, I remember when we sort of decided, we realized we had this unique story to offer. We had this opportunity to sort of translate that into our life's work. A friend of mine said, "Oh my gosh, I can't imagine, what you've been through and what you're going through." And I just couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine that. I said, "Oh, that's okay. We're good." And he's like, "No, I couldn't imagine working with my wife. Like, I can't imagine that. It's so hard." And so I think, it's like this, what we're doing is not for everybody for sure. But I think God's allowed us sort of to, we got married when we were 22. Again, don't recommend that for everybody. Had major suffering at 26, became parents at 25. So our brains have kind of grown up together, and I think in so many ways that's helped us. I think Catherine's therapist said we're trauma bonded, which I guess that's accurate. Can go a lot of ways, but there is something that I think in the midst of the deepest suffering that you share in a relationship, it can break you apart, or it can interweave you even more deeply together. And I think for us, so much of our life and work are just this mission that we have in our marriage together. So we're not sort of like, on opposite sides of the issues or lines. We are sort of looking outward. That keeps sort of some of the other distractions or the hurts or the disagreements sort of in reference to this bigger vision of what God's called us to. It just puts things in perspective. Takes constant reorientation. There's nothing like going to do a marriage talk and getting in a horrible fight over nothing right before. It's really embarrassing and humbling.
We should tell them.
It happens all the time.
Several years ago, we ran into this lady at a coffee shop, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I remember when you guys spoke at Passion Conference." We were like, "Oh, thank you so much. Bless you, friend." And she's like, "And I walked in right behind you, and I couldn't believe when I saw you on the stage, because I was right behind you when you were fighting going out there." She's like, "I remember hearing you fight, and then there you were." And I'm like, "Bless you, sister."
No, but it was way more impactful to her than anything we said on the stage.
Did.
So
she said it meant so much to her, yeah.
I think, the gifts of just like, suffering young, and we've all experienced the reality of that in some way, probably, but it can inform how you live the rest of your life. And they've done beautiful and terrible studies of people on their deathbed and just the things that we regret when we realize, gosh, that went by fast, And like the antidote to that is to say, like, when we're hit with the reality check that this is a miracle, like that we're here, that we're all here. And again, to be able to put that in perspective with reality and say, you know what, some of the struggles and hardships of marriage, what if we move through those together with this vision of a mission God has uniquely called us to, and got the help we needed, plugged into community, didn't try to sweep stuff under the rug that we need to deal with, but looking towards this end of this story together, because it's coming sooner probably than we realize, and to live a life where we don't have those regrets, where we loved well and we forgave each other, and we leaned into the passions God has given us, and the opportunities and the relationships. And so that's what we want to keep doing together. And that's the only way we know how to keep doing this, is just doing it real, fights and all, and mess and all, but loving well and forgiving well. To the very
I think
end.
a lot of research shows that conflict in marriage is actually not what breaks up couples. That actually, it's whether or not you can resolve the conflict. It's how it ends. We have a lot of conflict. We're both very strong personalities. We're both firstborn. We're both controlling. So we have some rockin' disagreements. And that's okay. It just matters how you resolve. And I hope we end well. TBD.
We'll see.
Yeah. We're
I like
18
it. We'll see. TBD for us all, indeed.
Yeah.
But for today, we made it.
That's true.